out when oh, Marjorie, thank you very much. I would definitely have forgotten about this recording. So thank you for prompting me. So that essentially is the argument, right? That depending on the criteria being used, so for example, I mean, and I'm sure you go to some public places, as soon as you enter the right, taxis are not allowed here. And so if you are coming for the program in a taxi, you probably have to get off. Maybe now that there's Uber and Yango and the rest, that definition of taxis are not allowed here may be of no use, right? Because you can still get in with your Uber taxi because it's not branded. They'll probably not stop you. But you ask yourself, why is it that taxis are not allowed in? Sometimes some of these taxis probably may be well kept, probably newer than a private car, which is, I mean, dispensing very dirty fumes and all that. But yet, because it is not a taxi, it is allowed in there. It happens. Okay, so these are some of the things that we talk about. So one, we are trying to understand the nature and the scope of social stratification, understand the systems of social stratification, and also maybe ask ourselves whether there is a system of social class in Ghana, right? So what is exactly social stratification? The point I put here is to say that a structured ranking of an entire group of people based on wealth, power, prestige, and privileges. So in other words, what social stratification actually then does, essentially, is creates a level of inequality in society. And this is usually based on the kind of hierarchy of groups. And to some extent, they do not just create the inequality, but also kind of perpetuate an equal economic reward and power in society. So I'm sure you are familiar with this whole cliche. Do you know who I am? Right? Anytime somebody uses that phrase, do you know who I am? Do you know who you are talking to? Or if somebody asks you, who are you? In a very arrogant manner, it gives an idea that there's a bit of inequality in there, there's a bit of power play there, and somebody sometimes want to flag this. In the early part of this year, we were having this whole discussion about Article 71. And when we talk about the 71, there are people, generally political appointees, right? So you include the president, the ex-presidents, judges of a superior rank. So the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court judges, the Court of Appeal judges, ministers and their deputies, parliamentarians and other things. And these are people who receive a lot, generally a bit more of public purse for the kind of work that they do and what have you. And the discussion centrally has focused on the fact that so much of our resources are used to compensate them for the kind of work they do. And the understanding is that it creates an unfair society. And the reason is very simple. A teacher who probably was earning 2,000, 3,000 Ghana cedis a month, without any additional qualification, right, gets elected as a member of parliament, and automatically, within a space of just an election, his economic status automatically changes, right? So you have people who have never worked, they just get appointed as deputy ministers or ministers, and automatically their life transforms. They get a V8, they get a saloon car, they get police escort, they get cooks, they get gardeners, they get all these other things at the expense of the public purse. right? And the whole idea is that it creates a bit of inequality, and it's not just creating it, but also perpetuating it. Because what these guys seek to do consistently is to ensure that they maintain that status quo, right? But I mean, as sociologists, we are not oblivious of the fact that society has never been without hierarchy. There's always been, society has always been hierarchical. But what we are interested in is what are the bases upon which some people are on top, others are at the bottom. And what does it mean when some people are on top and others are at the bottom, or others are at the middle level, and all those things for our day-to-day survival and what have you. Well, so another term that is also very confusing sometimes, if you are not careful, it confuses you from social stratification, is social differentiation. Social differentiation here, we are talking about the natural or the biological differences that exist between human beings, okay? Such as age, sex, and what have you. These are social differentiation. It exists biologically, it exists naturally, right? However, this social differentiation could become the basis upon which the stratification is built. So let me give you a typical example. In most cases, in most families, or let's even start from, in most societies, one gender is preferred to the another, right? And so based on the preference, do you get it? Based on the preference, certain valuables are made available, okay? So if you live in a society where women is more cherished, then the female gender is then valued. And to some extent, resources are a bit more made available for being a female. You are revered and all those other things. At the same time, if you live in a society where age is appreciated, then getting older then is also seen as a bit more respectful. And so more privilege or a preferential treatment is given to. And I mean, even in Ghana, until recently, right? One of the cliches we felt was that being old was equivalent to being wise, right? Being old was equivalent to being wise. And the elderly were given a bit more preferential treatment. So for example, if you get to you get to a bus station, and then there's an old man and a young man, and they all need a seat, obviously, by virtue of the kind of reverence that we give to old age, the older person is likely going to be offered a seat earlier than the younger person, right? It is the social stratification that is being built around social differentiation, okay? It's the same thing about race. It's the same thing about color. It's the same thing about body build and all those other things. At every point in time, what the physical differences, the biological differences could become the basis upon which social stratification is also built. So if you live in a community that values height, right? And so if you remember, in traditional societies, one of the criteria for selecting a chief was his physical build. And so you may be the strongest, but if you were not thick and tall, you would never be made a chief. And so height then was being appreciated. Do you get the argument? It got to a point, even in Ghana, when the color of the skin, right? And look at how it has been. And because other societies were able to package their light skin and made light skin a bit more preferable, what happened? They developed chemicals, and you saw people buying it just so they can lighten their skin and what have you. Look at our beautiful ladies. for some strange reason, we have been told that having a short hair is not appropriate. And so what are people doing? They are investing so much to have a long hair, though artificial. And it appears that whatever it is that they are packaging is also attractive to a constituency. And so that constituency is more willing to appreciate long hair, even though they know it's artificial, than a short hair. Okay, but these are natural biological differences. But like I said, they also become the base upon which some of these privileges are given and others are denied. Right. So what are some of the systems of stratification? So we are saying that any stratification system may include elements of more than one type. Okay. Some of these stratification are ascribed, others are achieved. So for example, the social stratification that are normally built on social differentiations are usually ascribed. You don't work to achieve it. So you are either a Caucasian, you are even an African, or you are whatever, Latino or whatever, right? You are ascribed. I mean, you work to. If you live in a typical Ghanaian society, you are either born into a royal family or you are not born in a royal family. You don't work to become a royal, no. So those are the ascribed ones. The achieved status are the statuses that comes with certain independent action. So for example, if we are looking for a graduate, unfortunately, you guys are not qualified because you are here to complete your undergraduate studies. Okay, so there's a vacancy. The vacancy says that it's going for a young man who is 20 years of age, who has a first degree. You may be a young man, right? You may have you may be handsome. You may be 21. And unfortunately, because you don't have a first degree, you don't qualify. Because the criteria, and nobody is born with a first degree, you go to school and achieve it. Right? So social position attained by a person largely through his or her own effort. We call them. So in fact, your status as being a student of the University of Ghana is achieved. You didn't come here on your own simply because you were born into a family and by virtue of that, you are at the university. No, you sat for the WASI, you passed, you bought admission, you selected your courses, and you were admitted. So it's a status that has been achieved. But the status of being a male or female, you didn't do anything to it. It was biological. So that status is going to be what we call ascribed. But again, it only becomes stratification when certain privileges are offered you by virtue of being a male or a female. Is that okay? On that same level of ascription, you know, for example, so the University of Ghana, as part of our affirmative action, normally on admission, will offer a +1 grade to females. So for example, if the cutoff point for sociology is, let's say, aggregate 10. For everybody, if you're a female and you study sociology and you got aggregate 11, you may be taking. Why? Because we want more females. Because historically, females have been treated unfairly in certain areas. And we feel like doing that will ensure a fairer and equitable society. Right. So there are generally two types of societies. We have the open and the closed. The closed are the societies that where you are born into, you cannot move up. So we say that social mobility is 0. But there are societies where, yes, you may be born at the bottom, but through dint of hard work, you can rise through the rank and come up there. When any society that allows movement within the social strata is called an open society. And when we talk about open society, it doesn't mean that you may only move from down to up. You can actually also move from up to down. So there are some people who were born into a very rich family, but are currently not. Emmanuel, I've seen your message. You are saying the line is terrible today. We are not sure whether you are the only one experiencing it. Can the rest of you let me know whether your line, you are also having a very terrible feed? Hey, what's happening? Really? Okay, so safe across is better now. Let me turn off the video. Sometimes the video can also be a problem. And let me get the feedback if by turning on the video, the feed is better. Ima, Mavis, and the rest who had complaints.
Sir, please, it's okay now. Thank you.
All right. So thank you. If it's working now, then I think I'm better off without the video. Okay, so that's the point I was making. So it depends on open and closed-ended or closed society. So open allow individuals to move up and down hierarchically. Closed mobility is virtually or totally impossible. A typical example is we know all this about the caste system in India. Even in Rwanda, in Central Africa, there's a kind of similar case. We all know the Indian caste system. So we have 4 systems of social stratification. We have the slavery, so we have the slave and the slave master. As for the caste, then we have the estates, and then we have the social classes. The social classes actually what is a bit more dominant now. That one appears to be universal. Nothing seems to be changing about it because slavery appears to have been abolished. I mean, people have a different version of this whole argument, whether it's sincerely and truly slavery has been practically been abolished, and what have you, yeah. So people say that slavery, it was actually the most extreme form of legalized social inequality, right? It varied from time to time. You understand all those things. So in Greece, captives of war and piracy were the main source. So when there had been a battle and you are defeated, the United States and Latin America, it was more of an ascribed status, right? So enslaved individuals are owned by other people. They were treated as properties, such as you treat your household pets or even appliances. At every point in time, you can dispose them off, right? But we all know that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights currently is binding, so nobody can be held hostage or can be made to be treated as a slave. Even prisoners cannot be, they have their rights and what have you. The caste system I have talked about, these are common with the Indian system. It is hereditary, so you are born into it and you remain there. The system of ranking, usually religiously dictated, and it tends to be fixed and immobile. So in a more, among the Indians, especially among the Hindus, they had these 4 main levels, okay, that they refer to as the Varnas. And this is how it looks like. So we have the Brahminis or the priests who are at the top, okay? Then we have the warriors who were the second.
My hand is going to be this one. You are not on me. I'm leaving.
We heard all that you said, don't worry. So we have the traders, then we have the servants, and then you have the last group, normally referred to as the untouchables, right? And you couldn't move from one level to the, in fact, in most cases, there was supposed to be no interaction at all between each groups. So you couldn't marry from here, you couldn't marry from, you marry from within. And so your children also become that, you know, yeah. The estates was associated more with the feudal system or the feudal societies in the Middle Ages. And this was just, it required the peasants to work land leased to them by their owners, okay? And the main reason was that it was a way of trying to secure protection from them. Because if you not, then you could be killed or could be captured and taken to other places. Okay, to some extent, it was similar to the case or the slavery systems. Okay. Over time, the prestige and other titles emerged independent of land ownership. And this was because some people had discovered certain skills. Okay, but in a feudal system, what happened was that you are either a landowner or you didn't have a land. And so we employ you to work on it so you can survive. But as other titles of reverence emerged, so when Christianity and other things, then the priest then will emerge. When you are producing certain things, and then people emerge because they had money and they start, and okay, what we will do now is to sell your product, so they have money. Others also had some handy set of skills, so artisans, and they were making a lot of money. Okay, and this led to the collapse of the estate system, which then has been replaced by what we call the social class system or the class system. So it is more about the more of this that you have rather than either two. So the difference really is that the estate and the class system is that the class then says that, okay, so let's say we are 100 people, all of us cannot be on the same rank. 500 of, the 50 of us have $1 million. 30 of us, 30 of the others have 10 million. 20 have 500. We are all somehow with certain economic resources, but some have more than the others, right? So depending on how much you have, you belong to a particular class because there are certain privileges that comes to you that those without those resources can also have. So a class system is a social ranking is based primarily on economic position, in which achieved characteristics can influence social mobility. Okay, so the boundary between the classes are not precisely defined. It can move, one is able to move from one stratum to another. It can climb up or descend. So it's just like what we are having. So you are in a class today. Today you are so and so. How many of you are in class? About 99 of you. We generally put you in the same class, right? Because you are all in level 200. You are taking sociology. By the end of your 4 years, some of you will have, all of you will qualify for a first degree. But the first degree, some will be first class, some will be second upper, some will be second class, second, third class, and some will be pass. So that is how the class system is. Like, it's a ranking that is based on achieved characteristics. Do you get it? But until the final point of analysis, some of you probably first semester, you made a grade 3.5, your cumulative grade point. Some probably made less. Some probably made more and all that. So that's what, so depending on how your performances are, you can either go up or you come down. And that's what we mean by the social class system. But in this case, it's usually based on economics. When you talk about economics, you're talking about things that are of economic value. It may not necessarily have to be cash, but things of economic value, right? So you may have cars, and these cars are economic value. That when you put all of them together, maybe it's about $1 million. Somebody may have cash, but have no cars and all that, but it's about 9 million and all those other things. So essentially, that's what we mean by the social class system. There's many ways social class has been measured, right? But class is largely viewed as a statistical category. So I talked to you about, so some occupations are well appreciated, educational levels, income, and sometimes even place of residence. So for some of us who live in the rural Accra, just because of where you live, we can put you in a particular class, right? So I know when people talk about certain locations, we are talking about, and again, it's also because land and property in certain areas, by virtue of the privileges and the facilities that are available, have certain prices. So for example, accommodations in East Legon, Westland, Roman Ridge, Cantonment are priced not even in a local currency. Even though when you go and pay in a local currency equivalent, they will take. Do you get it? So somebody tells you that it is not just about the 2-bedroom, it's about the quality of the building. It is about the location of the building. Now, people say the view, that when they are in the room, what do they see? So if you have a solid view, your value of your property shoots up. We all know some occupations that are more prestigious. And no wonder if you ask your children, or many of us, we want our children to take up those positions, right? Yeah. The last two things that I've not talked about is what we call prestige. And prestige is a combination of respect and admiration, okay, that an occupation holds in society. And look at how people do this. So you see them, they normally will put down, they have an associational tag. So you see the University of Ghana, University Teachers Association, UTAG, then they'll paste it in their car. GMA, Ghana Medical Association, then they'll put it there. Then the lawyers, member of Ghana Bar Association, then he put it there. And for the medical doctors, they will always put their stethoscope, they will hang it in their car. Why? Because it comes with certain respect and admiration. And that's what we refer to as what? The prestige. The esteem is actually the reputation that an individual, okay, has earned within an occupation. So yes, you may be a lecturer, you may be a doctor, you're a member of that. So the first instance, being a member of the University Teachers Association gives you that prestige. But as an individual, when you have achieved something, you get an esteem. In other words, you become notable for something that you have done as an individual by virtue of your professional association or by virtue of your professional achievement. Then that is what we refer to as the esteem. Any question up to this stage? Any question up to this stage? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slides. So let me hear you. We have barely 30 minutes, so if you don't have a question, then let me move on. So it was a question that we are asking, social stratification in contemporary Ghana. And here, normally, this is one of the things I want you guys to do. So we are saying that social stratification tends to get pronounced as specialization increases with technological development, right? So, I mean, let's look at this. When we're growing up, when we talk about the engineer, it meant something small to us. But now, even in the engineering field, there are varied specialization, and people then get to pronounce that area, right? So now we know that there's chemical engineering, there's mechanical engineering, there's petrochemical engineering, all those other fields. So the specialization is increasing. Now they have building engineers. In the past, they used to call themselves building and construction, B and C. Now they say, no, they are building engineers. I don't know, the term engineer appears to resonate and come with certain prestige. So people want to do that. Somebody says that when the uneducated performs the work of a night watch, he's called a watchman. As soon as people who can read and write join the watchmanship, the name changed and it became what? Security. So it's either a night security or a day security. You don't say watchman, okay, or watch, no. And then again, you realize that women also got in, right? So you can't say watchman or watchwoman, no. It's a security person. So it could be a private security or a state security. The specialization that come in, and these people are receiving certain training. And so the stratification then emerges, and then you get to know the difference between them. They have introduced conditions that widen the gap between people in terms of wealth, power, prestige, and all that. So some of the sources of social stratification in Ghana essentially are formal education and skills. Gender is gradually becoming insignificant, so let's take note, right? The other thing that we also wanted to hear, I'm talking about education. So there are hierarchy of primary and secondary education systems, right? So you have the high, middle, and the low class. The high schools are normally those that run the international curriculum. Then we have the usual private school that many of you attended, who do the local curriculum. And then we have the everybody goes some, the public school, popularly known as the Saito, right? And these are where you see education becoming. And you know, the thing about social class is that beyond the economic, the economic value, right? That places one within. There's also a culture. There's also a culture that comes with social class. So you hear people and they tell you that this event is a black tie only. This event is strictly by invitation. And normally they expect a particular class of people to be there. Right. And sometimes even the same event, you go to the place and they tell you people who pay certain amount are supposed to sit here. You go there and sometimes they'll tell you that this is reserved for A, B, C, D. Right. And the whole idea about this stratification, that's why people will send their kids to international school, is influenced by what they envisage tomorrow. Some of them want their kids to have even their tertiary education abroad, first degree abroad. And so they feel like, okay, then let them do the international curriculum. Sometimes it's also because the idea is that when we give them such opportunity or startup, they are likely to have a higher or a prestigious occupation, and which will also translate into higher income and what have you. We also have political stratification, right? You have political stratification. So we have the traditional authorities. If you are a chief, you are this, there are certain privilege that comes to you. And now we have even a partisan one. You stand an election, when you win, the prestige comes with it. Automatically, you are called His Excellency. Automatically, by virtue of winning an election, you become an honorable. And it's not just in titles, but it's also in other material and social things that comes to you. I've talked about the appointees that the president will have to make, so many of them. We also talk about religious stratification, right? I mean, and I think it is still there. Sometimes people will not tell you, but you see some of them. So for example, I am looking at this one. We have the Orthodox versus the new religious movement. The Orthodox churches appears to be more organized, appears to be have members of certain class, right? Whereas the new religious movement, so for example, in most of the Orthodox churches, if you don't have a minimum of secondary school, you can never become a priest. I mean, secondary education, you can never become a priest. The new religious movement, there's no such requirement, right? The emergence of new religious movement and the characteristics of their members. It's like the Orthodox churches usually have more of educated people in the church, more of the established people in the church. The new religious movement are usually for the downtrodden, the poor, the frail, the uneducated, and all that, right? And even now, look at, even within the Orthodox churches, there's a distinction between pastors who speak English and pastors who do not speak English. And look at the quest for academic titles, and even religious titles, right? So we have the local language speakers, pastors, and the characteristics of their founders as against the English-speaking pastors and their founders and all those other names. So even in the church, there's a bit of religious stratification. And you look at even the place of women, okay, within these denominations, right? For Islam, there's a clear division in terms of gender, right? And women are not supposed to do certain things. There's only men who are supposed to do certain things. So even there's that stratification. Another way we can look at it is even in terms of the marriage and the family system, the stratification. Now, it appears that the family is gradually becoming nucleated, even though sometimes I think the nucleation of the family is at just one level, right? So for example, those of you who were born in Accra, you probably may know just your cousins and your aunties. It ends there, right? But if you were born in a smaller community, you probably would have known many more of your extended families, right? And what have you. So we have the metropolis and the satellite relationships, right? So the urban versus the rural, all those dichotomy also exist. There's also the restricted expansion of the marriage market, right? Where in this case, ethnicity, social class, and religion is becoming more of the focus and all that. Then I also talk about the social reproduction of prestigious professions. When I talk about social reproduction, I'm talking about where people who have occupied certain prestigious position would normally want to reproduce themselves. So if he's a lecturer, he will make sure that one of his kids also becomes a lecturer. If he's a medical doctor, he will make sure one of his children become a medical doctor. If he's a lawyer, he makes sure that one of his children become a lawyer and all that. But at the same time, people who are of lower rank are also working so hard that their children will be better than themselves. So poor families are not reproducing themselves, are aiming not to reproduce themselves, sorry. You remember this whole concept of vicious cycle of poverty. But one of the things you observed in Ghana is that those who are poor, not the very poor, because the very poor will not even get the opportunity to send their kids to school. If they do send their kids to school, they will end at basic school. Even with free senior high school, some of them will still tell you that they cannot buy the little things that their children need so they can take up their position. And so they will end up being random. But the not so poor, okay, will do everything possible that their wards become better off than they are. But those who have a very prestigious profession are more likely to aim at reproducing themselves. Now, the bigger question, why as sociologists are we interested in social stratification? Especially when we have said that social stratification creates inequality. And why? Because it makes some other people have more resources than others. Other people have more privileges than others. So why should we be interested in it? Yes, we are interested in it for a number of reasons, but the key among them is the fact that the practice of social stratification is pervasive. Everywhere you go, there's social stratification. And so we need to understand it. The first thing is that, one, as students of society, everything that is in the society is a subject matter. Are people equal? No. Are people different? Yes. So because it is part of society, we need to understand it. Two, it also influences the way people interact with the various social institutions. When I talk about social institutions, again, don't forget, we are talking about the means by which the basic needs of human beings are satisfied. Because there's a culture of stratification. The poor have a particular culture, the rich have a particular culture, the middle class have a particular culture. And when you don't understand that, you are always going to have an interaction, a human interaction that is always filled with conflict. Right, so that's why I put on its influence on human interaction. Is that okay? Because whether you are poor, whether you are middle class, it has a particular culture. And sociologists also believe, with the exception of especially those of us who are Weberians, that is those of us who believe who belongs to the Max Weber's schools of thought. We believe that social stratification is inevitable. But the Marxians believe that no, it isn't. So Marx says that in a very progressive future, in a socialist and ultimately the communist state, there will be no social inequality, that all of us will be okay. We'll be not. But for those of us who believe in the Weberian school, we believe that it's inevitable, right? That in every society, there's going to be inequality. But that notwithstanding, we also believe that the inequality must exist, but what makes human beings to enjoy their basic dignity as human beings must also be present, right? But that notwithstanding, we also understand that when people are on top, they control certain resources, certain powers, and receive preferential treatment. We must understand. Because when you don't understand it, then when people are abusing it, you cannot know. And what have you. So this is where I draw my last slides. If there are questions, I would like to take them. All right, so let me see those who have questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and then I'll call you, and then it continues. Yes. Who has a question, please? Richmond, let me hear you.
Okay, sir.
Oh.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
yeah.
You went...
Looking at social stratification. Yeah, okay. I was saying, looking at social stratification as like, it generally means like in every society, automatically some people may be up and others may be down. But like I want to know if those up and like those in the middle and those at the bottom, are they like are they interrelated? Like do they depend on each other to survive? Or like those are the up, without those down, they are well off, they can do things on their own, or they do depend on each other to survive? That's what I want.
Oh, I don't think you, okay, indirectly, your question answers itself, but for the benefit of all of us, I would attempt to respond to your question. So one, you need to understand social stratification. It simply means that it's hierarchical ranking, right? Some people are on top, some people are above. But why are some people on top and why are some people down? We are interested in knowing that good. And I'm saying that this could come about by virtue of just biological differences, okay? Again, it's also sometimes based on human needs, right? And then scarcity of certain capacities. So everybody can be a liberal. It doesn't require so much skills and training, right? But not everybody is a medical doctor. Why? Because being a medical doctor requires a certain level of training and tenacity and perseverance. And because that is the situation, certain privileges are made available to a medical doctor because they are scarce. So scarcity automatically creates that. But how do you become a medical doctor if you don't have a patient? How am I a lecturer if I don't have a student? Right? So my being a lecturer is dependent on me having a student. So yes, there's that independence. There's that dependence, essentially. It's just that sometimes, the prestige that comes with the office makes people forget that they need these people. So I tell you seriously, if I don't have you, my PhD and my lecturership is useless. Do you understand? But my position is higher than yours. But my position is only higher because you guys are there. How do I become a lecturer if I don't have students? How do you become a medical doctor when you don't have patients? How are you a lawyer when you don't have clients? And so it is natural that there's that interdependence, right? But the truth of the matter is that, okay, so Emmanuel is adding up. Emmanuel says, how can you be a president without being elected? In fact, there have been many presidents who have never been elected. So that's not a very simple. Unless you say, how can you be an democratic? Let's go ahead. Who was it?
So why is it that they tend to look like? So do you get me?
They tend to
those in the upper positions tend to look down on maybe us, like those who are below.
Yes, them. You.
If
okay, let me ask you a question. Richmond, answer this question. Why do you tend to look down about your colleagues who didn't get admission to the university? Okay, thank you very much. So that's the answer.
Get it.
You get it. You see, and this is what we do as human beings. Everybody is quick to look at the other person and think that, no, the other person is the problem, forgetting that we are all human beings. Being on top of others gives you certain privileges. And sometimes as human beings, it gets into our head. It's as simple as that. And sometimes what we accuse other people of being guilty of, we are actually guilty of as well. All right, so Esther says that he thinks you can't be a president without citizens. That's perfect. Because you are only a president because some other people are followers. Thank you, Esther. Great. So please, can the stratification system cause a halt in development? Let's say when the lower class get tired. Okay, so let's get this way again. So you see, again, this is what happens. And I don't want us to reduce this social class discussion to even the national level. Let's take it from who asked the question? I want to. Whose question was it? Okay, get tired. That should be. Nana, hey, I've not heard from you today. How are you? Great. So the point really is this. So Nana, I don't know where you come from. I don't know where you stay. Nana, where do you stay? Let's have a conversation. It's been a while we had this conversation.
I stay in Kumasi.
You stay in Kumasi. Where do you come from?
Yes. Bokrom in Kumasi.
Great. But Bokrom in Kumasi, but that's where you come from, or that's where you stay? Which of them?
Yes.
Where are you?
That's my hometown. I live at Inshiaso.
You live at Inshiaso. Good. So Bokrom, great. What is the relationship between you, those of you who live in Inshiaso, and those who are in Bokrom? What is the impression those in Bokrom get about you?
Okay, personally, I barely know my family members. Yes,
But then I think the few that I know, the relationship isn't so strong. We only meet during family
funerals or family functions and all that. So,
yes.
And I'm sure they might be thinking that because you guys appears to be better or because you are initiated, so you are looking down upon them, right? And so sometimes they feel like, exactly. So that is how this whole stratification. So even so you see that when I was doing the analysis, I started to use the same institutions. I started from the political. We talk about the religious. We talk about the marriage and the family, and that's the same thing. The metropoles as against the satellites. Anytime or the urban against rural, there's always that perception of it, because you see, being an urban area appears to give you certain exposure, gives you certain social capital, right? So you are in the university, some of your cousins even never made it to high school. And because they didn't make it to high school, automatically there's a gap that has been created by achievement, right? So you meet them, you're having a conversation, sometimes you want to have a higher level conversation, and you realize that they lack the skills, they lack the competencies to engage in that higher level conversation. Automatically it creates that gap, right? And that is how it is. So he's a businessman, yes, he has established his business. He's talking about millions of dollars, and you are thinking about your 550 cedis or 500 Ghana cedis monthly salary. The two of you are not at the same level. His orientation, his perception about things are completely different from what your perceptions are. I'm supposed to be doing about some level of analysis, but I feel like, no, you're undergraduate, you won't get this concept in the way probably I think you need to get it. It creates something kind of a barrier and all those other things. So it happens in every facet of our lives. And that is the kind of thing that we talk about, right? Because being on a particular strata comes with its own social capital. It comes with its own characteristics. It comes with its own expectation. It comes with its own, and so that is what happens. And it's the same thing that happens from the national to the citizen level, like Lester said. You can't be a president and that. So you are a president, yes. Every region is asking for road, but the resources available to you can only do 2 regions. When you decide to do Greater Accra, those in Ashanti region will cry. When you decide to do a voter region, those in voter Upper East will cry. Do you get? So that's why some people think that it is bound to happen. It's inevitable. The stratification, certain people have privileges, their orientation, their values, and all that. And let me give you a personal example. About 20, 25 years ago, I think by then I should be in high school, right? Then I had colleagues who charter a taxi. And then I was like, what is wrong with these people? Are they not being wasteful? Because those days you charter a taxi and it was like now maybe 10 pesos. Right. But 1 peso would have sufficed for a trotro. So I used to describe them as wasteful, right? Because I couldn't afford that. I'm sure today people will say the same thing about me. Right? Because a trotro probably would have just taken me like 3 cedis. But I'll get an Uber that would take me, let's say, 50 cedis. And all that. So it's the culture that comes with being at a certain position. Anyway, any other question? Yes, let's have this conversation. Okay, so Botwe says that it comes with its own social sanction. Perfect. I mean, I like the way you put it, social sanctions. And here, sanctions here, you know, that in sociology, when we talk about sanctions, we are not only talking about negative sanctions. We have positive sanctions and negative sanctions. So it comes into, so for example, you're probably interested in your privacy. So I'm talking about a total experience. I'm talking about your privacy. You're talking about how quickly you want to get things done and what have you. Yvonne, let me hear you. Thank you, Botwe. Yvonne, let me hear you.
Sir.
Yes.
Please, I asked a question.
About?
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Sir, can you hear me? Okay. Sir, please, when you explained about the social stratification, where the what's the name? The class of about the so does that mean that the conflict theory cancels out the theory which says that a time will come there will be no form of social stratification? Because from your explanation, you were like, when the businessman is talking to the man who gains 500 cedis a month, there's difference in their reasoning and stuff. Does that mean that that school of thought having the notion about the social
What, Yvonne, I missed a bit of your question, but if I got it, unless your line is still good, then you can come back and ask the question, because I dropped off briefly. So you can come back and ask your question, Yvonne.
Okay, so can you
go ahead? Yes, speak.
Okay. So my question here was that the school of thought.
Isaac, kindly mute your microphone. You are giving us a terrible feedback.
Sir, please, the school of thought that says that there will always be social stratification. Yes. Does it mean that that school of thought cancels out the other school of thought that says that a time will come there will not be any form of social stratification? Because from your example, from your explanation, I asked a question about the lower class being tired. So from your explanation, you were like, the two men who had different social classes can't reason on the same level, because the guy who will be earning, who will be thinking about his millions of cedis or dollars is different from the guy who thinking about his 500 cedis he earns a month. So my question here is, can there be can the school of thought about the social stratification cancel out the school of thought that says that there will not be any social stratification at a point in time?
No, it doesn't necessarily cancel out. You see, it is a perspective, and at a point you decide which of the perspective you subscribe to, right? I hardly subscribe to Karl Marx's argument, particularly on the inevitability of social class. I believe that social class is always going to be with us. That's what I believe. But what I also believe is that it is also the responsibility of society to ensure that these classes do not lead to an alienation, complete alienation of the weak, right? That is the school I belong to. But there are others who still believe that it is possible to have an egalitarian society where everybody is the same. Yeah, that's what some people think, right? But so it doesn't necessarily neutralize or cancel out Karl Marx's perspective. No, because Karl Marx have said that in the future, right, so for them, this is a product of capitalism, right? So capitalism created the impression that certain services are more superior, right? Certain services, and his argument that who makes you think that, for example, not everybody can be a doctor. Everybody can be a doctor. The idea is that people who want to project their offices create barriers and makes it so difficult for others to access it, right? And then use that same thing to turn around to say that, listen, social stratification is justifiable, right? So that's Karl Marx's argument, right? That is those with power create blockades, and makes it so difficult for others to assess where they are. And on that basis, justify their superior resources, okay, in the name of scarcity. So that is the extent to which Karl Marx's argument then go, which then makes it possible to say that we are going to have an egalitarian society, and so there will be no stratification. We will all be equal. We all provide, society then will provide the needs according, will provide resources and make resources available according to your needs and what have you. So that's the argument that I want to make it clear to you. It doesn't necessarily. So in level 300, you're going to do what we call perspectives. And this is where you are going to look at how the same phenomenon could be looked at different perspectives, right? And everyone actually will be right in their own right, in their own eyes and in their own analysis. And some of these arguments are very consistent. Do you get the argument? And you know, some evidence even give credence to what Karl Marx says. So for example, in Ghana, if you didn't read biological science, general science, you can never qualify, you can never read medicine. But I know Ghanaians who never read general science in high school. They've gone to China, they've gone to read medicine, and they are back in Ghana practicing as medical doctors, which indirectly affirms Karl Marx's idea that some people are just placing barriers, okay, on people. Do you get the argument? And,
yes,
and what
sir.
have you? Yeah, so those are some of the arguments that we want. So it doesn't necessarily neutralize that of, yes, Nanama, yes, your hand is up. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Personally, I believe that the theories, it's not possible to speak to any of them, just one of them. Sometimes there are cases where functionalism applies, there are cases where the conflict theory applies, and then all other cases. So it's not possible to stick to just one and then you move with it, because inequality, personally, I believe inequality is functional, because if there's no inequality, some people wouldn't strive to move forward. And because of as a result of the inequality, your parents were treated a certain way. So they'll come home and tell you, this and that, so that you can move up the social ladder. But because of what someone who has been to university, who has a PhD, because the person treated her in a certain way or him in a certain way. So for me, that kind of inequality, because of what someone has said to my parents, someone has said to a family member of mine, and all those things, I think it's functional, because based on that, I can move forward and I feel like, okay, because this inequality is going on, I think I should move forward and get to the top where I can experience how it is to be at the top, not necessarily to treat people in a bad way. That's what I think.
All right, thank you very much. So you see, I like your conclusion, but you see the premises from which you came actually contradict with your conclusion. The argument is that it depends. So you see, so it's like the glass of water. You can either decide to see it as half full or half empty. That's what we mean by perspective. So where is your focus? Is your focus more on the part that is filled or the part that is full? That is what this whole theory's argument is about, right? And sometimes, depending on where your focus is, you then amass all the evidence to support that claim. In fact, the argument that you made about the functionality of inequality belongs to the functionalist perspective. The conflict response to you will be that it is because those who are up there have created the system. And you know, the Karl Marx argument that the system as we have it now is a product of capitalism. And because capitalism have realized that it's under threat, they just create a system as a way of trying to perpetuate itself, right? And so that is the argument they are not going to move. Why should it become difficult, for example, okay, to create the avenue for everybody to go? So look at what is happening. I don't know if you are following this. So over 2,000 people sat for the law school entrance exam. Only 759 were admitted. The argument will be, oh, but they passed. The other argument is that these are people who already have a Bachelor of Law, right? Why are you making it difficult for them to go and study? Especially when in this country, you have fewer lawyers in the country. We have less than 5,000 lawyers for over 30 million population. And that's what the other argument is, no. The fact that we have fewer lawyers doesn't mean that everybody should be made. The law profession is a profession for integrity, profession for intelligence. and all that. So the person must prove beyond reasonable doubt that he has the capacity to do that. So let's sieve it so that at every point in time, we can know that we have lawyers who have certain credibility. And so, yes, it must be screened. And that's what they are doing. So it depends on the angle you want to take it from. But I like some of these discussions. It means that we are learning. It means that we are being analytical. It means that we are looking at things from different angles. And that is what society is. So when you're having a debate with other people on a particular issue, you don't look at them as a person, but you look at the issue. And sometimes the position people take are influenced by their private experiences. And I like the example Nana gave, that it's with inequality, it motivates other people to achieve, right? And look at on the principle, look at some of the cliches that have been developed. That when people don't work hard for things, okay, or when they get things for cheap, they don't value it. But when you know that if you don't put your best foot forward, you will fail, and you put your best foot forward and you pass, you are happy because you worked and you achieved it. And so these are some of the whole argument that we talk about social stratification as to whether it is inevitable or it is a creation of the capitalist system as a way of trying to perpetuate itself, or whether some people become whatever it is, I mean, and all that. So this is quite important. Thank you very much, Nana, and Yvonne, and everybody who has asked the question, unless there's another set of questions. If not, we'll call it a day. Any question, please? All right. So thank you very much for making yourself available today. We'll meet you hopefully next week at 9:30 on campus. I wish you all enjoy the rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Girls.
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 Bye.
Adios, señor Mac.